Are all of our stories about wizards, superheroes, and space battles just childish entertainment? Or is it possible that there's a reason that these heroic stories of good versus evil are so attractive? Is it possible that what some call fantasy is actually a glimpse into reality? Epic stories that pull back the curtain and help us understand how God's world really is. The project of Reforming Nerdom is to answer these questions by exploring different elements of nerd culture, whether it's comics or video games or movies or books. And yes, we're Christians, so we're doing it from an unapologetically Christian perspective. We want to help Christians engage the world rightly by discovering what is true, good, and beautiful in these stories of courage, sacrifice, and redemption. This doesn't mean that there isn't plenty of ugliness and wickedness in nerddom that needs to be thrown onto the burn pile, but together we want to explore our favorite tales from Star Wars to Lord of the Rings and honor Christ by seeing how they reflect the true story, the greatest story ever told.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Reforming Nerdom podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jordan Cecile, and I am joined, hopefully as always, by my partners in crime, Nate Wright and Ben Emery. Fellas, how you doing?
Ready to take on the world.
Absolutely. We've been talking about this for so long. I'm just excited to get it going.
I'm just impressed that the three of us convinced all of our wives that this was a good use of time, energy, and resources for us to get together and talk about nerd stuff. I don't know how we did it, but we did it.
I haven't told her yet.
I would say the jury's out until they hear the first episode, and they might be like, "You guys suck." That's just
yeah, that's the thing. I guess we'll my wife, she just pretty much was like, okay, you need to go and talk to other people and not just me, because she's getting sick of me complaining about woke Hollywood and how silly video games and stuff are. So now I think it'll be therapeutic for me and helpful for her that all of our listeners get to hear the ranting and not just her. So I think it'll be good for everybody. But before we get into today's episode, which I think what we're wanting to do today is just kind of lay the foundation for what we're wanting to do with this podcast, with discussing nerddom. But before we even get into that, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping for everyone. Just a reminder, we are Reforming Nerdom. And each week, we get together to talk about all things nerd culture, including movies, TV, books, video games, and much more, but all from an unapologetically Christian worldview. You can watch all of our episodes on YouTube and listen on podcast services around the world. And if you love what we do, you can become a Patreon subscriber where you'll get all of our episodes ad-free, get exclusive shows, and other awesome stuff. And this episode is brought to you by the Ezra Institute, but we will get into that a bit more later. Now, I think it's probably helpful, excuse me, to even just introduce ourselves a little bit. I think some of our listeners will know who, well, Nate, who you are, as you are on a number of podcasts, but Ben and myself, people might not know who we are. You might know me as Air Jordan, and that's a bit of a deep cut for some people listening. And I know Ben has graced
an even deeper cut.
Well, and Ben has graced the airwaves before with his podcast endeavors. But why don't we just give a little bit of an introduction, who we are, and even answer what is the nerdiest thing about yourself. So Nate, why don't you start for us?
Sure. Well, my name is Nate Wright. I'm a pastor at Crossroads Bible Church in Ingersoll, Ontario. I'm also the Canadian director of the Ezra Institute. And I host a couple of podcasts. So the Ezra podcast for cultural reformation, I do with Dr. Joe Boot. The Rebel podcast I do with our associate pastor, Chris Poots. And I have a wonderful wife, Colleen, and we have 4 kids, Quinn, Judah, Harper, and Peyton. And I would say, the nerdiest thing I do now is probably instill all my nerdy interests into my children. Like I was just Judah just found under my dresser the other day my old Magic the Gathering cards, which was probably one of the nerdiest things I did as a teenager. But we were going through them and
And you
looking
still
at them.
have them. Well
I
done.
do still have them, and I have them because I can't wait until I can teach Judah how to play Magic the Gathering so I can stomp him with my decks, which are still intact. So, so probably instilling all my nerdy qualities into my kids is the nerdiest thing I do now.
I can sympathize with that, actually. My everything now that I loved growing up, I'm just like slowly getting my kids into it. Like my second daughter is she just like loves Ninja Turtles now, only because I
Oh,
love Ninja Turtles and we
yeah,
now play
beautiful.
Ninja Turtles. So it's like equipping the next generation to love good stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. Ben, what about you?
Yeah, well, similarly to Nate, I also am a pastor at Crossroads Bible Church, working with Nate there. I have a lovely wife and 5 lovely kids. Oldest is 12, all the way down to 1 year old, and the nerdiest thing, very, very similarly. I actually never did play Magic, other just the occasional other friends playing Magic and stuff. Never actually owned any Magic cards, but I did grow up playing another very kind of lesser well-known TCG back in the late 90s, early 2000s, which was a Star Wars customizable card game. And yeah. So made by Decipher. Had a few really great years before it got canceled. And they've recently started a new one that came out this year, which I am definitely trying and have succeeded in getting my 2 oldest boys into. So we've been playing that.
Nice.
Now that I know that you're a Magic connoisseur, maybe we'll have to sit down and teach you as well, Nate.
You bet.
I actually kind of not. I wasn't ever really like huge into card stuff. Never got into Pokemon or. But there was a game for a little bit, and this is like, I think some people would say this is like top tier nerddom, but it was Warhammer Underworlds.
Oh yeah,
And I mean, if you guys like
that is top
deck
tier
building,
for sure.
Yeah.
it was, and a buddy of mine is huge into it. There's another game, I think it's called like Blood and Truth. It's like the kind of deck building game right now, really competitive. You go to tournaments and you can win like 50 grand by going to this tournament. For
Flesh
the
and
deck.
Blood, I think you're talking
Flesh
about.
and Blood, that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Flesh and Blood.
But
why
he's like, I came in third, so
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was me. Yeah, what was your handle at those tournaments, Ben? Your moniker, your alias?
No, I never got into like this was I was very much a closet nerd growing up, so never graced the door of one of those game shops other than to like run in and sneak in and buy something and then run out.
You didn't stop to say hi to Jordan, who is spending his Saturday painting figurines in the Warhammer shop? Or
Okay, well, I would just, you brought up Warhammer, and I like, if we're talking about the nerdiest thing I've ever done, it would definitely be painting Warhammer figures. Never played the game once ever, because again, I was too embarrassed to tell anyone else that I did it.
Here you are telling the world.
But man, those things were cool. Yeah. And I don't know if they made the most recent move, but up until at least the most recent move, I still had a little shoebox full of little painted Warhammer dwarves that my boys like to play with.
So that's the thing.
In terms of like nostalgia and keeping and holding on to things, I'll tell a very, very quick story, which might also increase my nerd level, but tell people the value of nerddom. So when I bought my first house, I moved out of my parents' house and went to Western University in London. And when I bought my first house, I sold about 50 comic books and made about $10,000 that I was able to use as a down payment on my first condo. And so I had a ton of first editions.
Case closed.
And honestly, so I mean, these are things that I got out of like flea markets and yard sales and stuff like that, because I frequented, remember the old like things that you would get, and it would tell you the value of various cards and comic books and all that kind of stuff. So I had those, and I knew what I was looking for, and it can be lucrative too.
Oh yeah. I mean, you have to imagine now those kind of things, the audience for like comic books, even like we know a lot of guys who just like the Marvel movies, but they actually now want the comics because like they want to have them on their wall and all those. Like,
Yeah.
you don't even have to read the comics for them to have increased in value. Like those things must just be worth a fortune now. If you, however long ago that was, you made that. And so Ben, I actually was kind of a closet Warhammer guy as well. Like I never have played full Warhammer, like the whole set the map out and
Yeah.
do the whole thing, and like you literally take a ruler and measure it out and roll your dice.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't done it. I've watched. I was there when my buddy was playing it, but I just would sit and paint with him. But then he got this deck building game, which was called Underworlds, and it was more of a like a board game meets deck builder. So you had your cards, but then you had the figures that you had to move, and when you played your cards, you actually physically had to go. And anyways, I wasn't actually going to say that was the nerdiest thing, but now that I'm saying it out loud, it's like okay, that probably has
Hands
actually
down.
is the nerdiest thing that I've ever done. But I did, I love painting those things. I still have some as well. I gave them to my kids because I just found them like therapeutic, sitting there. And I will say I would sit there and watching sports, right? You know, watching a football game, painting my Warhammer. So I was redeeming it to some degree.
Even it out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Balancing it. And it was before I was married. Weird how that kind of goes hand in hand, but not doing that as much anymore. But and just to even, I guess, now introduce myself. My name is Jordan Cecile. I work with Nate at the Ezra Institute. I'm the director of content and publishing. But I also have a digital marketing business, Cecile Marketing, that I've had for about 8 years. So balancing both of those things at the same time. I've been married for 10 years, just this last August, to my wonderful, patient wife, Melissa. And we have 4 kids, Claire, Alice, Lily, and Haddon. They're 8 all the way down to 3. So we have lots of fun there. And I mean, I was going to say that the nerdiest thing about me is I just like really love video games, but I think that the nerd thing with Warhammer, I think that easily just kind of trumped whatever I was about to say about video games.
That takes the cake for sure. Yeah.
So that is the nerdiest thing. That was about me. I don't do that anymore. I'd say the biggest nerdiest thing now is I love video games. I'm just one of those grown-ups who have a lot of responsibilities and don't have time to sit down and play video games. It sucks, and maybe you guys can sympathize with this to some degree, but I have more money now than I ever had. And so I have all the stuff, right? I've got a PlayStation, I got an Xbox, I got a Steam Deck. I mean, I got a Switch, and I don't use any of them that much just because I don't have the time. So it's like when you're young, you got all the time in the world, don't have the money. Now I got the money and I don't have the time. So it's just kind of one of those, well, here we are as an adult nerd where it's like, you know what? You do what you can. And now my time, similarly to you guys, is I play video games with my kids. And so that's how I still am able to enjoy that, and I find games that they like, that I like, and it ends up being good. So we're passing it on to the next generation. So
Judah just got into Fortnite, and so I've been playing Fortnite with him, which is a one-player game, which really just amounts to me like watching over his shoulder and telling him which guns to use. But it is quite fun when you transition into like playing these games with your kids. And one of the my favorite things that we do play together on the Switch is I got him the old like side-scroll Ninja Turtle game. And like that's just so much fun.
Like the SNES one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They remade it though. Like they came up with a brand new one that just came out. I think it was last year. Yeah.
Yep. We got him that one last Christmas, I think. So yeah. Anyway, that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. I actually that game brings up a funny story. My second daughter, she's the one who's really like Alice. She's really taken to video games. Like she just loves it. Loves watching me play. Loves playing. And so it was Ninja Turtles was her first game that she really played on her own, and she kind of owned it, and it wasn't just a Paw Patrol side-scrolling thing. Like she actually had to do stuff, she had to fight, she had to jump, and so she got really into it. And her and I actually worked through and beat the entire game. And so we're at the final level. Spoiler, you're facing Shredder, and we did it. And she put the controller down and just leaned back and was just like, I'm never doing that again. She was just so stressed out fighting, and I was like, no, we're done. That's it. Like we beat the game, and she was so happy, but she was just like, she was like shaking. I'm done. I can't do this again. And yeah, so she was just exhausted by it, but it was so fun to see her having fun with something, and we were doing it together, and ended up just being a great thing.
That game too it's old school in that you can't save it. You can't save your progress, right? So it's not like you get to level 10 and you save it and you can go back. It's like an actual old Nintendo game where when you turn
it's like
that
an
thing
arcade
up,
game almost.
Yeah, like remember that game Gauntlet, and there was like the the barbarian, there was the girl, the boy, the wizard, and the archer. And it was like an 18-hour game, but like you had to just leave it on.
You had to finish it.
Yeah, you had to finish it. So it's like I have to like stay up, make an all-nighter Friday night and play all day Saturday, and like sleep for an hour when my friend's playing. And like I remember the gauntlet that was to beat.
Yeah. Well, why don't we? I mean, we've just talked about a lot of nerd stuff, but I think it might be kind of fun if we just to, I guess, out ourselves at as to what kind of nerd each of us are, so people get to know us a little bit more. I think they've heard a little bit about our stuff, the stuff that we're into, but I think it might be kind of fun to. I mean, maybe I don't even know some of the answers to these, so I'm going to ask you guys a few questions, and you're just going to answer simply. Just let us know, shoot from the hip, gut reaction, what it is. So, Ben, why don't we start with you? Star Wars or Star Trek?
I definitely watched both growing up, but definitely Star Wars preferred. Yeah.
Okay. Lord of the Rings or Narnia?
Lord of the Rings.
Marvel or DC?
Marvel.
Favorite video game console of all time?
Ooh. I don't know if it's I don't know how to rank favorite, but the one I definitely spent the most hours on is probably N64. There's a lot of GoldenEye there.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
Wow, that's lots of time. Yeah. All right. So your favorite cartoon growing up?
Ooh. Well, back to Marvel. It's probably a tie between those like mid 90s Spider-Man and X-Men cartoons.
Yep. Favorite 80s action hero?
Like real life, like actor,
like
80s action hero.
Yeah.
I don't know. This might not exactly fit, but probably like Harrison Ford.
Really?
Yeah, like the two.
Okay.
Honestly, when I was in kindergarten, the two movies that I watched basically on repeat were Return of the Jedi and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yeah.
So like he was just the guy.
Yeah, it's crazy how he was both Han Solo and like Indiana Jones,
which is kind of the same character, just a different setting.
Yeah. I mean, it's just Harrison Ford. Yeah.
He's just It's like who's Sir Ian McKellen, right? Like it's just you find these guys and they become the guy in all these movies, whether it's like Magneto, Gandalf, like it's just you find the guy and they're great in different roles. All right, that we already talked about that, so we won't worry about that one. But all right, Nate, your turn. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Yeah, I watched both. It would have been Star Trek very early on, but Star Wars definitely.
Okay, Lord of the Rings or Narnia?
Narnia. Yeah. I love both, but Narnia, I would say, yeah.
Okay. Marvel or DC?
DC, Batman, Superman, two favorites, yeah.
Favorite video game console?
Yeah, I'd probably go with N64 as well. I was gonna say Sega Genesis because I played a lot of Mortal Kombat on that thing. So Mortal Kombat on Sega Genesis took a lot of my time, but like I would say GoldenEye was definitely, because we actually me and some of my friends kind of tried to revive GoldenEye a little bit in high school, and like we had an old console and we'd take our lunches and go to a friend's house and have GoldenEye tournaments and stuff like that. So yeah, I'd say N64. And I just thought we're definitely going to do a GoldenEye tournament on Patreon at some point.
Oh, man.
Yes.
I'm shocked that hasn't just been ported over to newer consoles. Seriously.
Well, it's even tough.
I would play that in a second.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and it stinks because now with our new TVs that we have, I bought an adapter for our N64 and I set it up down in the basement. And it just looks awful, and you can't get it formatted. Probably it's just terrible because it stretches it. It doesn't actually look right. It's super pixelated. So
what we need is an old box TV to do our
we need a tube TV. Yeah, CRT. That's what we need. All right, Nate. And favorite cartoon?
I love Ninja Turtles. I love the X-Men as well, but by far G.I. Joe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then favorite 80s action hero?
Yeah, I mean, I would steal Ben's, but I won't cheat like that because that was a good answer. The first guy that came to mind was Sylvester Stallone because I must have watched Demolition Man 1,000 times in my life. I love that movie.
That and Dread.
Yeah,
Judge Dredd.
yeah, Judge Dredd, and even like the Rocky Balboa movies were like Rocky was one of my favorite movies. I probably watched Rocky 4, more than any other movie alive, other than maybe Princess Bride. But yeah.
All right. Well, for me, Star Wars or Star Trek, it would be Star Wars. I've honestly just never gotten into Star Trek. Wasn't big in my house. My dad wasn't a Star Trek guy. Growing up, it was always Star Wars. I would say Lord of the Rings for me over Narnia.
Ooh.
I just find, I just enjoy that world. And honestly, it might come down to, there was a really terrible Narnia movie. Was it like back in the 90s? I think.
Oh,
I think there was a
pretty
Narnia
bad.
movie. And it was awful. And I watched that not knowing anything about it. And then I remember seeing like Mr. Tumnus, and it was just like the makeup or the costume was terrible. So in my mind now, whenever I think Narnia, I just think of that awful 90s movie, and I just have a hard time separating it from the books. I've read the books probably 4 or 5 times now. We've, I think, listened to them with our kids a few times. So I like Narnia, but Lord of the Rings to me is just so much more epic.
Just be thankful your first experience with Lord of the Rings wasn't Rings of Power then.
Wow.
Seriously.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Good point.
And I there are some people I know who actually watch that, and I don't know how. Now, maybe we do. Maybe we actually have to sit down and watch it just so we can ridicule it and make fun of it. Like maybe that's a task.
I've gotten through a season plus like an episode and a half of season 2, and I could not continue.
I have a friend of mine who, I generally trust him, and he said that he likes it more than the movies, and I just
Oof.
right and I just and he was telling me about Lord of the Rings lore, and he was going into like Silmarillion deep cut, so he like knows it, and somehow, so I don't know how, based on everything I've heard and people and everything I've read about it, I just don't know how you can kind of come to that. But
I think though that kind of gets, not that I want to derail you because I want to hear the rest of your answers, but that almost gets the heart of what we're doing with this project, right? Is like you have guys like that who are probably sacrificing somewhat of their standards in order to enjoy something that's nostalgic because they enjoyed these things so much as a kid, and now they're getting ruined by woke idiots. But we cling to them. It's like the same thing with Star Wars, right? Like, so we'll get into that stuff, but that is why this is so important.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. Marvel, DC. I'm DC, big Superman guy. Smallville was like my show growing up. I loved Smallville. It's a shame that it lost its budget in the last season or two, and it just kind of sucked. But the first 2 or 3 seasons of Smallville were just perfect superhero television. Excellent. So big DC guy, and obviously the Dark Knight movies are incredible. Favorite video game console? I'm with you guys, N64. Just because, again, I'd actually maybe my reasoning for Genesis would maybe be there because it was the first one where we had like Aladdin, we had Batman, we had Mortal Kombat, we had. I
love that you guys had a Sega Genesis too. Nobody, when I was growing up, no one else had a Sega Genesis. Everyone else had a Super Nintendo.
Yeah, we had both.
I was rocking the Genesis.
We were blessed to have that. But yeah, Sega was dope. But just in terms of like one console that you could have, and if you could just play it with people, because it's just N64, 4 controllers.
Oh,
you got Mario Kart. You got
Mario Party. Mario. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Oh, like the things you could do with that console is just peak perfect. Like it's perfect for video games. All right, favorite cartoon. Ninja Turtles, like that's the one I look back on. That's the one I remember. There was other ones that was it like Animorphs or something like that? It was like Transformers with animals, and I remember I just adored that show.
Is that not the Beast Wars? Is that the one you're talking about?
Beast Wars. I think they changed the name. I feel like the name changed or something like partway through. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, Beast Wars. That was a favorite of mine as well. Favorite 80s action hero, like. I think I do have to go with Stallone just because like it was the Rocky. It was Demolition Man is like one of the most underappreciated action.
Totally, we should do a whole episode
made. It is on. We will. We actually will, because that movie, and I think it was kind of like prophetic in some ways.
Totally.
I saw somebody actually talking about it.
Patreon exclusive. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, our review of Demolition Man. But I adored that movie. That was we got Wesley Snipes at his best, and Stallone at his best as well. All right. Well, that kind of gives, I think, our listeners a little bit of a peek behind the curtain as to what makes us nerdy. And so I think now it's probably worth explaining a little bit as to why we're doing this. I mean, Nate, you kind of alluded to a little bit already some of the reasoning for why this kind of a podcast would be important, and it really the genesis of it was a few years ago. Well, actually, it was during COVID, where if you're not aware, listeners, that we all three of us live up in Canada, and COVID kind of turned Canada into a bit of a dystopian nightmare.
Yeah.
And early on, where
Kind of
we
like
didn't really know
Demolition
what was
Man.
going on, we heard that there's this virus that's killing people. At that point, I think probably all of us even had some level of trust in the media. So people were hunkered down. We weren't going out as much. We didn't know what was happening. So during that time, I already had worked at home for a few years, but I was just kind of feeling that isolation. And so because I love nerd stuff, I started really listening to podcasts, listening to video game podcasts, tech podcasts, sport podcasts, whatever. And just during the day to have some noise, to kind of have people around me, it was somewhat therapeutic at the time, just to feel like listening to people talk about things that I'm really into. But what I started noticing is that all of these podcasters were just woke liberal communists who are just, buying into all of the nonsense of Hollywood and media and the things they're talking about, using crude language. Sadly, you have these grown-ups who their lives are just completely consumed with all of this stuff, and it's all they think about, all they talk about. And it's just like, well, I mean, I like this stuff. I love talking about it. I love thinking about it. I love reading, watching, whatever, but I don't want it to be everything about who I am. And so then that just started me thinking over the last little bit, well, is there room for this kind of a conversation to be happening as Christians, right? From a Christian perspective, of guys who love God, who love His Word, who want to see the culture transformed, who want to see the world be a better place, but then also not fall in the other side of the ditch where we just kind of abandon culture, we abandon nerd stuff, we assume that it's all just kind of worthless. So then that's where the three of us started talking about, well, why don't we just do it? Why don't we have the conversations that I was wanting to hear, that I think all of us love having as we're thinking about nerd culture. We all love it. And how can we see more profitable and edifying conversations about this stuff without having to just listen to these, again, woke liberals ruin everything that we've come to know and love? So, Nate, why don't you even just take a little bit and explain some of the reason, I guess the theological reasoning, the worldview reasoning for why we think that this podcast is not only allowable, but rather it's actually necessary.
Yeah, I think that number one, I think that the reason we are drawn to stories and heroes and archetypes and good versus evil and battles and all that kind of stuff is actually because as we said, this is unapologetically Christian. I imagine we'll have a lot of people who are just here for the nerd stuff, but we are Christians with a Christian worldview. We believe that God created the world, and God created this world, and He set us in a world that is full of supernatural stuff. He set us in a world where the overarching story of history is that God sends His Son, His hero, into the world that He created, into the story that He wrote, to slay a dragon and win his princess. And so, these stories that compel us, they compel us because the Bible says that God put eternity in man's heart. We have an understanding that we're part of a bigger meta narrative. And so, even when you think through some of the heroes, Jordan and I share an affinity for Superman. I know a lot of people think that Superman was sort of a lame, gay superhero. He absolutely was not. Kal-El, literally, the genesis of the character was that he was written by a couple of young Jewish guys who input their views of the Messiah into a superhero, and this is why Superman gained popularity in the 1940s when he was fighting the Nazis and rescuing his people like a Messiah would. And so superheroes often become sort of a projection of the Messiah that many of us want to see, who will come and save society and everything. So So we can see Christ, we can see the biblical narrative, we can see all these things in the world that God made. And I think this is why these stories are so compelling. And then on top of that, because of my view of history, not only do I believe that God created the world and God sent his son into the world to slay the dragon and win the girl, but I also believe that Christ is in the process of conquering the world. I believe that Christianity wins the day. I believe that through podcasts like this and through preaching and teaching and sharing the gospel, I do believe that the culture will be won to the Christian worldview. And because I believe that, I think we ought to be redeeming things, not throwing things out. I think far too many times Christians throughout history, they've said, oh, dancing can lead to, bad things, so let's not do dancing. I mean, music is bad. These newfangled drums must be demonic. Let's not put them on stage. Christians throughout history have been against new things, against ideas, against cultural things with this view of retreat from the culture. We're supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. Let's not be tainted by all the things in the world. And rather than doing that, we would like to say, let's redeem it. So I don't want to abandon Star Wars because the woke leftists have taken it over. I want to see those stories redeemed. I want to see Disney's Star Wars tank, and I want to see it sold, at a fraction of the value they had to buy for it to somebody who understands that young men who are compelled by heroes wielding laser swords want to see a young man overcome, a dangerous villain, not see some woke female who's all about girl power. And so I just think that this stuff is worth redeeming. We want it. We don't want to abandon this stuff to the culture. We want to also point to the Christian worldview and the truth of the scriptures through the stories that we tell. And I think anybody who's into this stuff, whether you're a Christian or not, whether you have an idea of why, you all know that these stories were better when we were younger. And that's why they're nostalgic. But what you might not be aware of is they're better because they told the truth about the world that God made. And the woke leftists tell lies about the way the world is. And so we want to redeem them. We want them in Christian culture. We want to see Christianity take these things over, and they reflect truth about the world.
Yeah, I think that's so helpful, because it's just interesting how you see when you think about this kind of culture, and even maybe specifically nerd culture, there doesn't seem to be a balance in the interest and in how people entertain with and engage with it, where you often have these people who, again, like I'd mentioned, like the world where it becomes their entire identity, their entire life, spending thousands and thousands of dollars on video games and memorabilia and all these things. But then you have, at least in our circles, where, like, how many times would you hear the generation before us just say, how could you guys spend your time doing that? Like, what a waste of time it is to sit and play a video game. What a waste of time it is to do these things. So Ben, why do you think it is that Christians have just fallen so far into that side of things, where we don't want to obviously, just completely jump in and be owned by these things that we love, but then you have these Christians who over here just treat it as if it's completely meaningless, worthless. What's the point? So why do you think that is, that Christians have just abandoned nerd culture, culture generally?
Yeah, I think nerd culture is a really easy target for a lot of this thinking, because nerd culture, by and large, is leisure, right? It's like leisure, hobbies, pastime. Very very few people are like making a living from nerd culture. Obviously there's some, but so like these older generations look at it and it's time wasting. So I think it's a misunderstanding of how the gospel, when Christians are saying this, it's a misunderstanding of how the gospel affects everything and not just saving your soul to go to heaven. I wanted to quote Gershom Machen. So again, an old guy, right? And he says, Christianity must pervade not merely all nations, but also all of human thought. The Christian cannot therefore be indifferent to any branch of earnest human endeavor. It must all be brought into some relation to the gospel. It must be studied either in order to be demonstrated false or else in order to be made useful to the kingdom of God. The church must not only seek to conquer every man for Christ, but also the whole of man. And I think that's what we're doing here is we're not saying nerddom, all, it's all great. We love it all without qualification. But let's look at it. Let's study it. Let's actually examine it. What is good? What is useful? What parts of it can be, can serve the kingdom. And so I think it's just throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's just easier to do that rather than take the time to do the examination. And I think that's because right, everybody's got their thing, right? Like everybody has a hobby, everybody does something for leisure. And this is just the easy one to say is automatically, no bueno.
Well, it's kind of interesting when you think let's just go back to our parents or maybe our grandparents. They would have looked at the next generation at their hobbies of being a waste of time, right?
Yeah.
Our grandparents to our parents would have said, "Why are you sitting around listening to vinyls, right? Why are you listening to music? Why are you
Beatles?
going out? Why are you fixing your car up? Like, what's the point?" Like every generation has that thing that is foreign to them that they don't like. That I think can be perceived as just a waste of time because they just don't know, they don't understand, and it's just something that they don't do. But I also think it's what we're trying to, I guess, counteract here with, not that we don't need to throw around theological terms or categories or anything like that, but I think one of the big reasons why this conversation is worth having is so many Christians today would look at the world as something that is outside the realm of Christendom, as it's just something that is here, a temporary thing that is eventually going to be burned up, and this new thing is going to rise from the ashes. And now, not saying that that's not true in a sense, but we have this very fatalistic understanding of the future and the world and seeing things here, and it's like, well, it's just going to get burned up. What's the point? So what we're espousing is we come from a theological persuasion and an understanding of the world where this world does matter. This world is important and significant, and we're not just supposed to be thinking about heaven, and we're not just supposed to be thinking of spiritual matters. Because I think that was a thing that I wrestled with prior to coming to Crossroads, Nate. And I know you and I have chatted about that a lot, whereas our previous church would not have the same outlook on the future, would not have the same understanding of the physical and the spiritual and how those two things actually coexist together. Because I was really actually, I felt guilty about watching a movie. It's like, well, Jordan, why aren't you giving up everything you own and just praying and reading your Bible? And souls out there need to be saved. So like, how can you ever justify doing anything for fun when you could just go out and save one person? Now, obviously, those are things we're supposed to do. But I just felt guilty anytime I sat down to play a video game. Like I actually had in the back of my mind where I'm sinning by doing this, because no, this is not something that Christians should be doing. We should actually be going and only be focusing on making disciples and only focusing on prayer. And it was actually kind of crippling for me. So it was in coming to Crossroads and hearing the theology that you teach and that you hold to, whereas like Ben, you'd mentioned, the gospel is much bigger than just individuals and their salvation. It's actually the entire world, the entire cosmos, all of creation is actually being conformed via what Christ did in his life, death, and resurrection.
Yeah, there's actually a consistency to the way, like that previous line of thinking. Like if it is only next year and it's all gone, like that, then it does make sense. It is kind of a waste of time to sit down and play video games, but we don't think that.
I think too, like there's another aspect to this. It's all wrapped up into the same thing, but I think it's important for us to say is that we also believe that God created the world in order to be enjoyed. And one of the things, I use this analogy sometimes when I'm teaching people is, the Psalms in Scripture actually compare, understanding God's law and applying it to your life and understanding that this is how God says life works best in his world, understanding God's law is actually as sweet as honey to us, which actually there's an implication there, which I think is incredible. It means that if you have not tasted and enjoyed honey for the sake of honey, if you did not know that it was sweet, if you had not actually tasted it, there's actually something about what God is trying to teach you that you wouldn't understand. So he's actually given us things. Another psalm says that God gave us wine to make men's hearts glad. Like the world is full of good things and we are to enjoy them. And that includes like storytelling, that includes like so many things that nerd culture actually gives us. One of the quotes that comes to my mind from G.K. Chesterton, he says, "Fairy tales don't give the child his first idea of the boogeyman. What fairy tale gives the child is his first clear idea that it is possible to defeat the boogeyman. The baby has known the dragon intimately ever since it first developed an imagination. What the fairy tale provides for him is a Saint George who's able to kill the dragon." And the idea there is that, like, if we don't interact with God's world in such a way that we can tell stories and we can experience honey and we can, then what is it that we're inviting people into in terms of Christian culture? Culture is, we're talking about culture, but culture is always the externalization of the inward religion of a people. So you can have a family culture, and it's an expression of what the family actually believes. And so when we talk about nerd culture that we are thinking about nostalgically was an outworking of what people once believed. Now we have, I would say, bad nerd culture, and it's because the religion, the internal beliefs of the people are corrupted. So anyway, all that to say, God also made the world for us to enjoy, and I think that's an important aspect.
Yeah, Ben, you actually mentioned something, as this first episode, we're really talking about, is nerddom worth reforming? And I think we've already explained some of the reasoning why we think it is. But one of the points you mentioned was not all nerddom is worth reforming. And that's because we're not, to some people's disappointment, we're not going to be talking about things and justifying what is sin and what some people as Christians have permitted in their own lives, or they permit in the lives of others, where our hope is to actually throw away the stuff and burn up the stuff that isn't worth saving. So spoilers, watching Game of Thrones, I mean, we know what is being depicted quite explicitly in Game of Thrones. So that is a thing where the celebration of and the actual depiction of sin. Well, it's like, no, we're not talking about that. We don't want that to be saved in this whole building project of Christendom 2.0. We actually want only that which is glorifying to God, loving and loving our neighbor. And it's not loving our neighbor to watch them commit adultery for the world to see. And so that's one of the things we want to discuss as well, just throughout the various episodes that we're going to be having, is what aspects of nerddom are worth saving, which aspects are actually just going to be burned up like chaff, and seeing what does that look like in the future to have a thriving nerd culture that isn't sinful, and that is actually bringing glory to the one who created all of it.
Yeah, and an analogy to think through is like, think of nerd culture as a garden, and it's now overgrown with weeds, and there's all kinds of things in it that make it ugly. And the lazy person just wants to throw their hands up and say, I'm done with this. But a good gardener would go in one by one, take out the weeds, and kind of show what's beautiful underneath. And then gardening does take like pulling weeds over and over again. They come up all the time. And so what we're trying to do with this is we're trying to weed the garden of nerd culture and show that it actually can be something that's beautiful, that's God glorifying, that can actually help you as a man, as a father, as a husband, as a creature in God's world. Because there is something here that's worth saving. It's under a lot of weeds right now, but we want to put our hands to that hard work of weeding the garden and showing what's beautiful underneath.
That was deep.
That was deep. Well, so like, even when we think about some of the things that were why this is important, like we do see that it doesn't take much to see that woke liberal communists are just ruining movies. Like you like Ben, you said you love Harrison Ford. Like, did you watch the most recent Indiana Jones movie?
No, and I never will.
Well, and it's like, here it is yet again.
I've got an image in my brain of what Indiana Jones is, and it will forever remain that.
And it's not a terrible deadbeat dad. That's not the image you have in your mind.
Yeah, it's already been ruined enough by whatever that fourth one was.
Well, it just makes you wonder. It's like, what did Harrison Ford do? Who did he upset that they're just like systematically destroying his legacy of these characters? Because you look at Han Solo, right? In the last one, it's like just deadbeat dad who it's like, oh well, your son wouldn't have turned into Kylo Ren if you just had loved him a little bit more. And it's just I did
abandon your wife and children and the rebellion, and all responsibility, and just kind of taking your carpet friend back into space and be a space pirate.
Yeah. So then, like, it just sucks how he was a great character. Now, obviously, we're not trying to defend everything about Han Solo and everything about Star Wars, because I just know there's going to be somewhere in the comments where it's like, well, you do know that the Force is rooted in like Hinduism or Buddhism. Like, we're not saying that every single thing is just right. Like that's not what we're saying. But like the aspects of that story and those characters that are good that are being destroyed right now are masculinity. The men who are largely in a lot of these stories, the ones who are protecting and fighting for their families and fighting for the sake of the galaxy or the love of their neighbor. Like that's one of the things that we're seeing Hollywood right now is just completely destroying.
Yeah. And interestingly, like, so I'll just walk through a couple of these things. So you mentioned Han Solo, but I mean, I do think, and I'm sure we're going to have some angry feminists in here as well, because nerd culture is full of them as well.
They're long gone, Nate.
Fair enough. But any of you who are still listening, let me alleviate you of listening any further by simply saying, one of the things that we do believe that God created men to be a source of provision and protection, to be strong, to slay dragons, all that kind of stuff. And so, when you look at some of these things, we used to love that Duke was very protective of Scarlet, right? In G.I. Joe, Scarlet was pretty awesome in her own right, but Duke was protective of her. He Luke Skywalker, and just the responsibility he felt for righting the wrongs of his father and saving the galaxy. It's not the same when it's Rey. It's not the same when it's G.I. Jane, right? It's just not the same, because women are designed by God to want to be nurtured, to want to be rescued, to want to be, and so I think that, first of all, they've turned the stories on their head by trying to make every woman powerful and strong and without a flaw, and tried to make every man full of flaws, woke and, a feminist and all this kind of stuff. But the other thing that they've done that I think is really terrible is that when there are male heroes, I'm thinking particularly about video games now, is you have these video games that might actually be good video games. You think of like the Dragon Age franchise or like the Mass Effect franchise, where they do actually ruin these things because they make part of the whole story, which is this grand epic, but they make part of this whole story is like pursuing alien sex, and like, they reduce this male role, and they feed into people's sin, and they've ruined things in a lot of different ways. And I think that that's where so many Christians have said this isn't worth it anymore. And I agree that there are certain things that just need to be tossed out. But if we don't reclaim this in the hearts and minds of Christians, then we're never going to have Christians. Like, have you ever been at church on Sunday? Like, oh, I'm so-and-so. What do you do? I make video games. I'm actually in film school. I want to be a producer, right? We don't. Largely, Christians have abandoned these things, and the Marxist ideology is the slow march through the institutions. They understand the power of art and storytelling, and video games and movies and stories, and they understand that they're shaping the culture because they're the ones involved in this. Christians take their hands off of it, and the best thing that we can do is make like movies like Courageous and whatever else, Fireproof. And the world kind of laughs, and they let us have our little, small slice of the pie that sucks. But there aren't serious Christians entering into this field with the heart for reclamation.
Yeah, and it's interesting just because we so much of that I think is because of the theology that most Christians have, and we're gonna do an episode where we're talking just purely about why loser theology leads to loser art. But and that's where a big reason why I think Christians aren't making good stuff is because, like, well, why would you invest the time, money, energy, resources into getting to the point where you are a master at your craft? Similar, like, think about the Pixar. I mean, there was probably 25 years where it was banger after banger, and like they didn't make a bad movie until they adopted woke ideology and DEI nonsense and all of that. Like, they were just cranking out crazy movies, but then, like, where are the Christian alternatives at? Well, we don't have Christians who are developing the skills to even compete with that. And so then we end up getting these really terrible movies that are on, platforms, God bless them, but like Yippee, where we have that for our kids, but it's like not great stuff. Like, we do it, we pay for it because we want to support it, but it's not really leading to much. And again, it's just so much of it is, I think, because people don't have that long-term perspective and that hopefulness for the future that we do. And so we see there's value in, like, this is going to take time. God could radically change the culture. He could do he could send a street evangelist outside of Pixar and preach the gospel and convert a whole bunch of them. Like, that certainly could happen. We could see Pixar just change course by nature of that. And, let's pray that kind of thing happens. But it also might just be you and I, the three of us with our kids, teaching them that, oh no, like, video games can be good, movies can be good. And like my daughter, my oldest, she's a really great artist. And so I want to cultivate that, because I don't want to tell her, well, there's no point developing these skills, kid, because guess what? Jesus could come back at any moment, and what's the point?
And your art's all going to burn up anyway, honey. Daddy loves you.
Yeah, that's right. So it's like, or do I cultivate in her a love of it? Because one, it glorifies her creator, but then also it allows her to use the gifts and the talents that God has given her to express herself in that way. And so I think that's what we're also just wanting to do is just help Christians think differently about all of this stuff. Is to have some sense of hope, to have to be encouraged, to lay the plow, and like know that, like, our generation, like, sorry, gents, this might break your heart, and listeners, this might break your heart, but we might not see a good Star Wars movie for 2 generations from now.
Yeah,
because we're certainly not getting a good Star Wars movie now. I mean,
nope.
The Acolyte. If they couldn't sell a show about lesbian space witches to 18-year-old pagans, then like, you're done, right?
Seriously.
And like, that's where we're at. And seriously, so it's like Star Wars is done as far as it's concerned right now, but who knows what happens when 2 generations from now, the next generation, right? And so that's what we're hoping for, is to see that kind of direction and motivation, and I think that's where, unfortunately, so many Christians just are lacking that. So yes, we want to talk about nerd stuff, but we also as much want to provide the theological conversation and worldview conversation that makes this like necessary, right? Because otherwise, if you don't have that, you're not going to see the kind of change that we want to see.
Yeah, and one thing I also kind of want to just tease our listeners with, we're going to do episodes on this where we talk about this, but I just want to kind of seed your thinking a little bit, is, there's going to be people who are listening to us who are spending far too much time on video games, on nerd culture, and we hope that what we can do is realign your priorities and realign your affections, and because one of the reasons I think that video games are so compelling for young men is that you're given a world to conquer. And that's actually something that God's placed in you. God has placed, from the very first man that God created, fashioned, and put in the garden. And he said, go and conquer the world, have dominion over it, subdue it. That desire for dominion is actually something that God put into us. And so that guy who spends all of his time immersed in the world of Warcraft, or immersed in some sort of RPG game that he, gets his identity out of this hero, it's oftentimes a form of escapism where we're actually feeding a hunger that God has put in us. And so we're feeding a real hunger, but it's been misplaced because we're spending all our energy and our time and our affection on conquering a fake world. What we want to do is say, if we can align our thinking to see what's good and true and beautiful about aspects of nerd culture, and then direct those things back into the real world. And we're not saying then abandon nerd culture and just do things in the real world. We're saying take what's good, enjoy what's good, spread what's good, and then apply it properly, and aim your hunger, your energy, and your time in the right direction.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, before we keep going, why don't we just take a minute and hear from our sponsor?
This episode of the Reforming Nerdom podcast is brought to you by the Ezra Institute. Founded in 2009 by Dr. Joe Boot, the Ezra Institute is dedicated to equipping Christians to think and live biblically in every area of life. Through in-person training programs, resources, and events, they help believers apply a Christian worldview to culture, education, politics, and more. With a growing presence in Canada, the US, and the UK, the Ezra Institute is committed to empowering the church to stand firm in today's secular world. Go to ezrainstitute.com to learn more. Now, back to the show. Well, welcome back, everybody. And, but before we actually have a fun game that we're going to be doing. It's a bit of a trivia game. And it's something that we're going to do. And hopefully with all of our guests that come on, we've actually got a lineup of pretty interesting guests that might surprise some people. And what their nerd interests are might surprise you as well. So a little bit of a teaser for future episodes. But we're going to do that because we want to get a sense for how nerdy people are. So we're actually going to have a high score and see how people rank. Anyways, we'll get into that in just a second. But I think we've discussed the reasoning for why we want to do this podcast. We've discussed a little bit about what our hopes are for it. We want to be able to see families change, individuals change, cultures change. We want to see good stories. We want to see good art. But Ben, why don't you just kind of give a bit of a teaser, or just our listeners an idea of the types of things that we're going to be discussing and the types of episodes that we're going to be doing with this podcast.
Yeah, so we're doing this for ourselves. On one hand, it's a fun outlet to, like Jordan said earlier, just to kind of talk about all the nerdy things we do or we used to do and reminisce and all that. But we really do, on the other hand, want to actually help you, the listener, help you think through some of these topics, some of the nerdy things that you do or used to do, and understand, was it good? Was it worth it? Was it a waste of time? Was it something that can or should be sort of reformed or redeemed? And so we've already talked about a few of the topics that we are planning on getting through this first season batch of episodes. We really want to kind of give you the full spectrum of how we kind of view nerddom and what we want to do with this project, and probably get a little more nitty gritty in the future. But, we want to talk about stories, right? And what makes a good story? How does the true story that God created in the world relate to the stories that we read or watch or listen to? We want to talk about the influence that Christians can have in pop culture, or can they have it, or do they have it? We want to talk about the negative side of nerddom and be really specific and explicit about the sorts of things that many of us who do dabble in the world of nerddom, what are some of the things that you maybe are intentionally ignoring because you do enjoy the nerddom side of things. You let certain things slide, which are, if you really thought about it, they're clearly sin. We're going to talk about some of the technology, some of the how some of that can be some of the stuff that's being used in video game and movies and all this, frankly, stuff that seems like future tech, and all the things that all the movies we watched growing up, all this AI, Terminator stuff, end of the world kind of thing, like that's being used in a lot of this nerd culture. Like how, like, is it good? Is it bad? How can we use it? How can we glorify God with it, or can we? So there's a lot of content here. There's tons of things to discuss. And then as we go, we also, like, we know that you're here to hear about just kind of the fun, nerdy stuff as well. And so we're that's going to be sprinkled in all along the way. We want to hear from you guys. We want to know what you like. We want to know what you want us to talk about. So let us know, comment, send us questions, send us, quiz question. We're going to be doing fun quizzes and stuff like that. Try and stump us, try and, all that stuff. Like we want this to be a fun, interactive, way for, all of us closet nerds to get our nerddom fix.
Well, and I think that's a good point, Ben, because my vision for this is that we can actually build out a community of like-minded Christians who can talk about how awesome Lord of the Rings is, or how terrible the Rings of Power is, but then also do so as Christians, as brothers, as sisters, and enjoy this as a community, because that's just the thing that I think all of us have experienced. You at church, if you all of a sudden bring up Marvel, well, how many people are going to group together and start talking about it, right?
You have to like slyly walk around and kind of hint at it and give a little nudge to make sure that they're not going to glance at you like, what the heck are you talking about?
Yeah, like Nate's not going to come and rebuke you and I for talking about Marvel, right? It's
no, those are the conversations I join on Sunday mornings.
Yeah, and that's right.
Did I hear Spider-Man?
And just so our listeners know, we actually have some pretty fun things lined up for our Patreon. We're going to do some shows that are exclusive on there. We're going to do things like movie watch-alongs, and maybe even a 007 N64 tournament type thing. So we've got some fun things in the works there for our Patreon subscribers. So we're excited for that. We've reached the time for High Score. This is our quiz show where we're going to be hoping to have our guests on, wanting to see how nerdy everybody is, and we're going to have scores here and compare them. And for today, we're going to see how Nate and Ben face off against one another in their knowledge of nerddom. So the way that this works is there are 4 different levels of questions. Each level has a different point a value, maybe a shroot buck. Maybe we'll call these shroot bucks. You'll get 1 shroot buck.
Yes.
If you get a level 1 question, and if you answer the question without me needing to give you multiple choice, you get a full point. If you need multiple choice, you get a half a point. And so then level 1, we'll get 1 point, level 2, 2 points, level 3, 3 points, and so on. So boys, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Nope. All right. First question. This is a level 1 question. In Star Wars, what color is Luke Skywalker's first lightsaber? Answers, please. Blue and blue.
Too easy.
Okay.
Whoa.
I put green.
Oh,
Whoa.
did you? Sorry, your video there wasn't super clear for me. Okay.
Oh,
Luke Skywalker's first lightsaber is blue.
Oh my
right.
goodness.
wow.
There we
How
go.
embarrassing.
Get him
How
out of here. Get him
embarrassing.
out of here.
Nate is 0. Ben is 1 point.
Jeepers.
Okay. There it is. All right. The nerves. It's intense, fellas.
Seriously.
This is intense. Oh, let's all right. What is the name of the superhero alter ego of Bruce Wayne?
Oh,
What? Are you serious?
Hey,
Well, Nate, you got the
you
lightsaber
just,
question
you
wrong.
just didn't
so-
know Luke Skywalker's lightsaber color.
Shut up.
All right.
Just giving you a head start.
All right. Batman and Nate is Batman. Perfect.
The
Ooh.
Batman.
You know what? I'll allow just Batman. Okay. This is one that's fun for us. I'm hoping you guys get this. In the Matrix, what color pill does Neo take?
It's the green pill, Nate.
God.
All right, gentlemen, reveal. The red pill. Excellent. All right. So our current score, Ben has a perfect 3 points. Nate,
Get
2
used to
points.
it.
Okay. All right. Here we go. In Pokemon,
Oh boy.
what type of Pokemon is Pikachu?
Oh. Oh man,
You do have the option of the
do I
multiple
risk
choice.
it? Oh man, should I? You've got your answer written down.
I do.
All right, I'm gonna talk this through just for a second because I can't remember if like electric or whatever is actually a type. So I'm debating if it's just normal because that's a type that I remember. Oh man. But then they're probably going to be both in multiple choice. This is the worst. All right. I'm going for it.
Okay.
Risking it for the biscuit.
Okay. Gentlemen.
Oh, I'm
Reveal.
changing my answer.
Oh.
All right.
Okay.
Oh,
Let me see. Electric. You are both correct.
Oh,
it is electric.
yes.
All right. We are now going to go up to our level 2 questions. These
Oh
are
man,
now
that
worth,
was level 1.
That was level 1.
Oh.
All right. What is the prime directive in Star Trek?
Ooh, is this like a word for word thing?
Yeah, it's more of a phrase, so this one might be a little bit tough unless you do actually just know it. I will be lenient in how perfectly you say it. Or
yeah, I think I'll go multiple choice on this one for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go multiple choice as well.
Okay. A, to explore strange new worlds. B, to seek out new life and new civilizations. C, non-interference with other civilizations. Or D, to boldly go where no one has gone before.
I'm ready.
Ooh. All right, you ready?
All right.
C.
The answer is C, non-interference with other civilizations. The prime directive is Starfleet's guiding principle, which forbids its numbers from interfering with the natural development of alien civilizations.
With non-warp civilizations.
Especially those that are pre-warp. All right.
Wow, Ben. Hat
So that's
comes
2
off.
points there. Okay. All right, here we go. What is the real name of Wonder Woman?
Oh man.
Yeah, I'm going multiple choice. I know it. I'll know it. I just need multiple choice though.
Okay. So
you won't accept Gal Gadot?
I will not.
Multiple choice.
All right. What is what is
wait,
the real
hold
name
on.
of one?
Is it first and last name?
It is first and last name.
Yeah, okay.
All right. A, Diana Prince. B, Selena Kyle. C, Lois Lane. Or D, Barbara Gordon.
It's a good thing there was only one Diana.
Yeah,
I agree. I agree with that.
All right.
Because I did not know that last name.
Okay. You each get
Even when you
one.
said it, I was like, that doesn't sound familiar. They're all going to be Dianas, and I'm going to be screwed.
So, Okay, what do we got here? Oh, no, that's too. All right, Nate, I'm going to help you out here. In The Princess Bride,
Yes. Ben knows it too, though.
what is the name of? Okay, I don't know this movie that well, so I might be pronouncing this poorly. But what is the name of Inigo Montoya's father?
Ooh, I don't think that's in the movie.
Yeah.
Pretty sure
Hold
that's
on.
only in the book. That's a super deep cut. I'm gonna need multiple choice for that one.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Like
I'm
Mr.
like going through the whole.
Montoya?
Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father.
not-
No name. No
yeah.
name. Yeah.
I'm almost positive that is
Okay.
not in the movie.
A. Domingo Montoya. B. Alejandro Montoya. C. Carlos Montoya. Or D. Hector Montoya.
I'm going A. I
A
have no idea.
and A. Perfect.
Just sounds right.
Correct. Domingo Montoya was a master swordsman who was killed by Count Rugen. Inigo Montoya seeks to avenge his father's death throughout The Princess Bride.
It did
I
sound
know that
familiar
movie
when you
really
said
well.
it.
So
and
if
I
you
had-
guys, like if you can comment, let me know if I'm wrong. But I'm quite.
That
don't
might
know,
be.
don't
I mean,
remember
that might be. I don't know the movies that well, but I just when Nate mentioned Princess Bride, it seemed like an appropriate question to ask. Okay, what material?
Oh no, you know what it is? Just as a side note, here's super nerdy. It is in the movie. It's when he sits down and tells the man in black the story. He says his father's name was Domingo Montoya. He says when the six-finger man returned to claim his sword, he slashed him through the heart. Yeah, it is in there.
There we go.
All right.
All right.
I mean, it did ring a bell as soon as you said it. I couldn't place it.
Good
Okay,
questions, man.
Question number, what are we at? 7, I think here. What material is Wolverine's skeleton coated with?
I'm all over that one. Don't know how to spell it, but
I expect proper spelling. No, I'm kidding.
Ooh, I don't know if it's
Okay.
AM or UM.
yeah.
Adamantium. Perfect. Close enough. Yep. All right. So you each get 2 points. Okay. So as of right now, I think, Ben, you are up 2. So now we're going to do a couple from
2
the
more points.
level 3. These are
This is-
hard
yeah.
questions.
This is where you can make the ground.
Yes. Okay. Ooh, you guys wouldn't know that one. I know you guys haven't read the Stormlight Archive, so I'll spare you of that. But
I don't even know what that is.
well, that's going to be a problem at some point. We'll get
Get on
there. All right.
You're only 30,000 pages behind.
Yes. Oh yeah. Okay. In Final Fantasy VII, what is the name of Sephiroth's signature sword?
Oh man, that is so specific. I'll need multiple choice.
Hold on.
Sure.
Hold on.
Oh, Nate, are you gonna do it?
I think so.
Oh man.
Okay, so if Nate's writing it down, you write your answer, Nate, and then
Yeah,
Ben,
I don't know how to
will then-
spell it. I think this is it, but I got to go for a Hail Mary because
you do.
I'm
You need
behind.
points.
I'm behind.
Okay.
I hope
All
it
right,
shows up
so
on your
Ben,
lip.
So for Ben, A, Masamune, B, Muramasa, C, Excalibur, and D, Ragnarok.
Oh, good grief. I have zero clue. I think I played Final Fantasy VII, but I don't know. All right. Here's
Go
my
with
shot.
Excalibur. That sounds familiar.
All right. Here's my answer. I got
All right. B would be Muramasa. Masamune is correct. So Nate,
Yeah.
3
Yikes.
points.
That puts you in the lead.
Just
Just
you
like that.
You took the lead. Okay, so we're going to do one more of the level 3, and then I'm going to add one bonus question, which is worth 5 points.
Oh boy.
All right. In Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic,
Oh yeah.
Who is revealed to be Darth Revan? 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 That's what it is.
Yeah.
Revan? Yeah. Who is revealed to be Darth Revan?
This is I don't know how to answer this.
What do you mean by that?
I don't want to say.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. I'm gonna go for multiple choice. This is a 3-point question.
This is a 3-point question.
Yeah, I've played it. I've played Star Wars, whatever the old galaxies is. Darth Revan, I love. I can't think of the name of. Do you have an answer down, Ben? I don't want to talk through it.
I've got an answer, but it's weird.
Okay.
So Nate wants multiple choice.
Yeah, I'll take the multiple choice.
Ben, are you writing it down? You wrote your answer down?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah,
I'm
okay,
down.
you're good. All right,
yeah,
Nate.
Yeah.
A. Bastilla Sean. B. Karth Onasi. C. The player character. Or D. Malik.
Oh, beautiful.
That actually didn't help me as much as I thought. Okay, I'm gonna go.
Okay.
Oh,
The player character is the correct answer.
Well
so
done.
Nate, 0, and Ben, you get 1.5 points. So now
Oh man.
Ben is up by 0.5 point. And we are now at the final bonus question.
Does this one also have multiple choice too?
This
Or
one
is this all or
does.
nothing?
No, this is gonna have you know what? I guess what do you guys think? What do you think for the last question? Do we give the option of multiple choice? Or I mean, I think we're going to I'm trying to see here a decent one. Ooh. Okay. I got a tough one. I don't know if you guys would be able to get it without multiple choice, but here it is. In Warhammer 40,000, what is the name of the event that shattered the galaxy and allowed the forces of chaos to invade?
COVID?
Put it down. Write it.
If multiple choice is an option, I am taking it.
All right. So, can I assume that you guys need multiple choice for this last one?
I sure do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. A, the Cataclysm. B, the Sundering. C, the Great Rift. Or D, the Horus Heresy.
Can you say that one more time?
No.
Okay, I'll repeat the question and then the answer. So in Warhammer 40,000, what is the name of the event that shattered the galaxy and allowed the forces of chaos to invade? A, the Cataclysm. B, the Sundering. C, the Great Rift. Or D, the Horus Heresy.
You couldn't go Mass Effect, right? Where I could just say, "You mean Mass Effect?"
Yeah.
Not Warhammer 40,000. That's not the answer.
Yeah, this is a 100% guess.
Okay.
I've got it.
All right, boys. Okay. Nate said the Sundering.
Ah, Ben. I don't even know if it's right.
I think we're both wrong, but it's okay.
The answer is the Horus Heresy.
I wouldn't have got
Yeah,
that.
the Horus Heresy was a galaxy.
That was like, it's definitely not that one.
Yeah, it was a galaxy-spanning civil war in Warhammer 40K, where the War Master Horus led a rebellion against the Emperor of Mankind, leading to the shattering of the galaxy and the rise of chaos. So, fellas, for our first ever high score, our winner, none other than Mr.
Well
Ben
done,
Emery.
Ben.
Thank you.
You, sir, are the greater nerd today. And now we will see who else. When our guests, we'll see how this stands up. But as of right now, Ben, 10.5 points to Nate's 10 points. Well done, fellas.
Close.
Wow.
So close.
Well, and hopefully
I
people
feel like the
see-
winner of this game could also be the loser.
Not on this show. On this show, the nerdier you are, the more you win. You're good.
But if our
Well, I
wives
think-
listen to this, you are the loser
Yes.
there.
I mean, if you answered that last one correctly without any help, maybe that's the time where you actually are the loser. But that's fine. We still love our Warhammer friends out there. But I think that brings us, gentlemen, unless there's anything else that you guys are wanting to add, I think that brings us to the end of our first episode of Reforming Nerdom. We hope that you, our listeners, our fellow nerds, found this discussion to be enlightening and entertaining. And if you did enjoy the show, we ask that you subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform or watch us on YouTube to make sure that you don't miss any future episodes. And if you would like to support us further, consider becoming a Patreon subscriber to get a whole bunch of awesome stuff and hang out more with us. And Nate, did you want to end with something?
Yeah, I just wanted to, for those who might be listening thinking that all the things we're talking about are childish, I want to leave C.S. Lewis with the last word. C.S. Lewis says in an essay on stories, "When I was 10, I read fairy tales in secret and would have been ashamed if I had been found doing so. Now that I'm 50, I read them openly. When I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up."
If I could take this mic and drop it, I would. No, that was awesome. That's a beautiful way to end. So thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And until next time, stay nerdy.